Appendix A, Part 228, the requirements of the House for the Service of the Act, the statement of the agent's policy interpretation first acted in 1907 for the House, for the Act was substantially revised in 1969 with the Public Law 91, 169 further amendments with the word enacted with the Federal Railroad Safety Authorization Act of 1976, Public Law 94 and 348 with the Rail Safety Impact Improvement Act of 1988, Public Law 10342 with the purpose of the law to promote safety employed with the travel upon the railway, limiting with the House, the service employed with the appendix was designed to comply and the effect of the law commonly encountered with the situation active with the government maximum work hours and employee with engaged in one or more of the hours basically categories cover the service achieved below an individual performs more than one kind of the cover the service during the tour of the duty of the most restrictive of the application limited to the control of the act apply with any of the railroad so that the term that's defined in Title 45 so U.S. Standard Code 431 is government that carries operation over its own railroad all line of the road with which even the train and engine but the services cover the service of the train engine service refer to the actual assembling of the operation of the train's employees who perform the type of the service that commonly include the train locomotive engineer, fireman, and conductor of the train man, switch with the switch and left with the other duty to come under the provision of Section 3 with the whole strip of the passage of the 1976 amendments, both inside and outside of the hostile conservation to be connected with the movement of the trains previously only outside of the hills were covered on the other employee with it actually engaged in connected with the movement of any of the train is covered with regardless of the job title limitations on hour. The act established with the two limitations for the hour, strip of the person over the employee engaged with the train and the engine, strip of the remainder required the permit of the work in excess of the 12 consecutive hours after working the full strip of the consecutive hours as an employee must be given at least 10 consecutive hours off duty during permitted to the return of the work. Second, no employee engaged in the train engine service may be required the permitted to continue with the on duty going on duty unless he adds and 8 consecutive hours of the off duty with the proceeding with the 24 hours later. The limitation with the reading the conjunction of the with the requirements with respect to the computation of the duty of the time discussed below with yourself of the service conclusions. 1. The employee works due to the broken interpreted with the valid period within the term of the release of the 4 hours more at the designated terminal. He may return the duty for the balance for the total 12 hours worked or during the 24-hour period after concluding the 12 hours of the broken duty at the end of the 24-hour period with whichever occurs first. The employee may not be required to permit to continue duty or to go on duty until he has had at least 8 consecutive hours off duty. The 20-hour 4-hour period to be referred to in the paragraphs 1 and 2 of the law shall begin with upon the commencement of the work tour of the employee immediately after having received the statutory off duty for the period of 8 or 10 hours appropriate duty time and effective period of the release on duty time. The commencement of the employee with the reports at the time place specified by the railroad terminates with an employee with the finally released all responsibility time spent deadheaded transportation to duty assignment is also counted at the time of the on duty discussed below. Any period available to rest for the 4 or more of the hours of the designated terminal is off the duty with all the other periods available to rest must be counted at time on duty under the law regardless for the duration of the term designated terminal meaning for the terminal 1 with the designated under the collective bargaining agreement if the home and away from the home of the terminal for the particular crew and assignment of the 2 which for the suitable facility for the food lodging carrier and union representative may agree with the establishing additional designated terminals having such facility. This point of the effect of the release under the act of the agreement with the designated with the additional terminals for the purpose of the release under the act shall be reduced to the writing that should make the reference to the particular agreement. This assignment is effective to the hours of service of the following area or the common situation illustrating the designated terminal concept. When the freight passenger road crew with the operator with the train with the home terminal A to away from the home terminal B with the other reverse the terminal A and B with the normally be designated with the terminal with a special crew assignment. However, the carrier and employer representative that may agree with the designated additional terms to have with the situatable facility with the food, lodging, and its appropriate points for the release for the under the hours of service act. The road crew A to the operate the train and turn around with the service from the home terminal A to the turn point around point B with the back to A with the terminal A with the only designated terminal for the specific crew assignment unless the carrier employer representative that have to agree with the designated additional terminals. Having suitable facilities for food and lodging, the crew is assigned with the operator that maintains for the work of the way with the train from the home terminal to A with the worker line of the road tie up with the rest of the long line of the road at the point B. The home terminal A with the tie up point B with the boat mouth qualifies designated terminals for the specific work train of the crew. Assignment over the course of the suitable facility for the food and lodging must be available to tie up with the point B. Deadheading under the act of the time spent with the deadhead transportation receiving special treatment the time spent with the deadheaded transportation the duty assigned with the train with the engaged with the engine service employed with the conservative on duty the time spent with the deadheaded transportation final duty assignment for the work with the tour of the point of the final release to non-computed either time of the duty or time off of the duty with the thus the period of the deadhead transportation to the point of the final release may not be included the required 8 to 10 hour off the duty period with the spent with the deadheaded transportation for the duty assignment that is calculated for the time of the employee report of the deadhead until he reaches his duty assignment all time time that is spent with the waiting for the arrival of the dead-headed vehicle for the transportation from the final duty assignment of the work tour with the point of the final release is considered limbo time. Either time of the duty with the notice time of the office to provide for the employees given no specific responsibility performed during the staff's hour. The employee is required to perform a service at any time during the period of protecting the train against vandalism, observing passing trains for any defects, unsafe conditions, flagging and shutting of the down the locomotives, checking fluid levels, communicating the train consistent with the information via the railroad. He or she will be considered as an on duty until the service is completed. Over the course of the railroad carriers operating the rules clearly relieve the employee of all the duties during the waiting period. Of no duties are specifically assigned with the waiting of the time is not computed as either time on duty or time off duty. Transit time for the employee is resident of the regular port point that is not considered the deadhead time. If an employee is utilized for the personal automobile transportation to point with the duty of the assignment other than regular reporting point live with the deadhead transportation provided by the carrier, such as the actual travel time considered with the deadhead time, however the actual travel time of his home to the point of the duty assignment exceed with the reasonable travel time with the regular reporting to point with the point to point duty assignment. The only later period is counted over the course. The actual travel time must be reasonable and must not include the diversion for the personal reasons. Examples of employee A received the assignment for the extra board located at the home terminal to protect the job 1 hour of the drive for the home terminal in lieu of the transportation employed by the carrier of the conveniency of the railroad paid for the employee for the fixed amount to provide his own transportation to and from the outlining point that the employee is permitted to go directly to the home outline point, driving to which takes 40 minutes for the normal driven time of the between his regular reporting point at this home terminal with the outlining point. It is 60% minutes. The actual driving time is 40 minutes. The concerned deadheaded time is counted at the time of the duty with under the act. Employee has performed the local switching services as outlined the point where the employee to return to the outline point where they evenly receive the hour tributary payment of making the return trip of the primary automobile 40 minutes for the time the transportation home is considered dead-headed point to the final release and is not counted to either time on duty or the time off duty. Wreck and relief trains. Prior to the 1976 amendment to the crew of the wreck with the relief of the trains accepted entirely from the limitation from the hours of the service unless under the present law there is no longer of the case the crew of the work of the relief of the train may be permitted to be done due not to exceed 4 additional hours in any period of 24 consecutive hours whenever the actual emergency exists. The work of the crew is related to the emergency, thus the crew would work up to 16 hours rather than 12. The act specifies the emergency case that exists for the purpose of the provision when the track is clear but the line is all open for the traffic in an emergency for the purpose of the wreck or relief services may be less extraordinary catastrophic event that is unavoidable accident or act of the God under section 5D of the act. For example, the crew of the wreck of the train is dispatched clear of the side of the derailment which is just occurred with the main line with the wreck with the crew rail, the crew re-rails, clears the last car on the maintenance for the way of the department of release of the track of the operating department of 14 hours, 30 days, 30 minutes, 14 hours, 30 minutes, and the duty tour. Since the line is not clear until the wreck with the train is out of the way, the crew may operate the wreck train as terminal provided that can be accomplished within total hours of 16 hours of duty. Emergency. The acts contain no general exemption with the term of the emergency with respect to the train engine service related to the work. See casualties acts under the general provision. Communication with the train errors. Coverage of the train handling of the orders of the governing of the movement of the trains is in the second tab of the coverage of the provision of the act applied to any with the operator, train dispatcher, other employee who believe the telephone, telegraphic, telephone, radio, or any other electrical mechanical device dispatch railroad reports, transmit, receive, and deliver predict the effect of the train movements. The approach of the law with those functional through the yard master normally is not covered with the provision. The yard master with other employee who performs any of the specified service during a tour duty tour is subject to the limitation on subject of and service with that entire tour. Limitation is not allowed with no employee with a performance covered service with involved with the communication with the train orders may be required with the permitted to remain on duty for more than 9 hours where the consecutive and aggregated in any 20-hour, 4-hour period in any office, the tower station, or the place and where to do more with the shifts that are employed. Where there only one shift that is employed, the employee is restricted to 12 hours consecutively and aggregated during the 24-hour period. The provision of emergency discussed below may be extended with the permissible hours of the employee performing this type of service. Shift. The term shift is not defined with the active legislative history, but the 1969 amendment that indicated that the means of the tour of duty consisting of the day's work of the one or more employee performing the same class of work at the same station, but who are scheduled to begin and end with work at the same time. The following examples of this principle are 7 to 3 a.m., one shift 7 to 12:30 p.m., then 1:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. to due Schedule 1 employee, including 1 hour in lunch period, 7 a.m. 3 p.m. to 3 p.m., 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. 2 employees scheduled due to 7 a.m. 3 p.m. to 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. 2 shift employees scheduled 2 shifts. Alright, duty effective periods of relief for the after the reporting placing of the duty employee is required to perform the duties at the either the placing during the same tour of the duty time spent traveling between the such of the place and considered the time of the duty under the traditional administrative of the Interpretation Act section 3 of the other period of the transportation review and personal commuting and thus off the duty time. The release period is considered off duty time to provide with a meaningful period of the relaxation of the employee with the free of the all responsibility to carry the 1 hour of the minimum acceptable one pale dead horse, 1 hour of the minimum acceptable release period for the time of the covered service. Emergency of this section of the act of dealing with the dispatcher, operator, with others. Transmit the receipt of the training order for the containment of the own emergency provision in the case of the emergency employee. The subject is denying a 12-hour limitation performed at work an additional 4 hours within the 24-hour period, only for the maximum 3 days for any of the periods of the consecutive days. However, even in the emergency situation, the carrier must make the reasonable effort to relieve the employee. General provisions applicable to all the covered services. Commingling services all due to the time of the related or the time of the railroad, even through the non otherwise subject to all the acts must include the commuting of the total time on duty time of the individual who performs one or more of the type of the services converted in the act. This is known as the principle for the commingling services. For example, if an employee performs the duty for the 8 hours of the trainman, then it should be the trackman not covered by the law within the time of the 7 and 24-hour period. No totally on duty time is determined adding with the duty of the time trackman as to the trainman. The law does not distinguish treatment of the situation, but does not cover the service files rather than proceed to cover the service with limitation on the total hours applied with both cases. There should be remembered that attendance at the required rules classifies duty time with the provisions commingling similarly with the carrier compels the attendance of the disciplinary proceeding time spent with attendance is the subject of the provision of the commingling. When an employee performs the service of the covered by more than one restrictive provision, the most restrictive provision determines the total of the on duty, where then thus the employee performs the duty of the train and engine service. Also, an operator provision for the law applicable to the operators applied to all on duty, off duty period during such aggregated times of the hour of an employee subject to the 12-hour provision section 2 of the law does not become subject to the 9 or 12-hour provision section 3 merely because he received the transmit delivers or orders particularly affecting the movement of his train for the course of the duties and the trainman casualties unavoidable accidents. Acts of God section 5D of the act state for the following the provision of the act that shall not apply with any of the case of casualty unavoidable accidents of the act of God know where the delay with the result of the cause not known but the carrier of the officer or the agent in charge of the employee that at the time said the employee left the terminal which could not have been foreseen with the pairs, but as it is commonly referred to the emergency provision judicial construction of the sentence for this limited the relief of the list of the granted situation, which are truly unusual exemption for the courts have recognized the delay from the operational difficulties are common in the industry but must be regarded entirely foreseeable, otherwise the act will provide no protection whatsoever. The common operational difficulties do not provide the relief from the act included, but they are not limited to broken drawbars, locomotive malfunction, equipment failures, the brake system failures, hot boxes, unexpected switching, double hillings, meeting trains, or does the need to clear the main line to cut the crossing of the justified disregard of the limitation of the act. Such contingency must normally be anticipated within meet within 12 hours, even where there are extraordinary event with a combination of events have occurred which by itself will be sufficient to permit excessive service. The carrier must still employ the due diligence to avoid limits of such excessive service to the true and proof the result for the carrier to establish that the excessive service could not have been avoided. Sleeping quarters. Under 1976 of the amendment that the act is unlawful to any of the common carrier to provide sleeping quarters for the person cover them in the hours for the act which did not afford such person with the opportunity for the rest free for the interpretation cover the noise under the control of the railroad, including safe sanitary quarters for the sleeping such as sleeping quarters include the crew quarters, camper and bunker cars, trailers. Sleeper quarters are not considered free for the main interpretation cover the noise under the control of the railroad if the noise level attributed with the noise source or the control railroad except for the logarithm of value of the 55 decibels and the collective bargaining. The hours of the service of the act prescribed as maximum permissible hours service consistent with the safety of the however the act does not prohibit the collective bargaining of the shorter hours service within time on duty. Penalty as amended the Rail Safety Improvement Act of 1980 of the Rail Safety Enforcement Act of the Review Act of 1992 of the penalty provision of the law applied to any of the person entity with any type of the cover of the Title 1 U.S. Standard Code 1 including but not limited to the following railroad manager, supervisor, official, other employee, agent of the railroad, any owner of the manufacturer, leaser, or lesser of the railroad equipment, tractor facility, any with an independent contractor providing goods and services by the railroad, and to the employee with the such owner of the manufacturer, leaser, or lesser independent contractor, except that the penalty may be assessed against the individual only with a willful violation. See Appendix A of the Title 49 CFR CFR Part 209 for the violations occurred within September 3rd, 1992. A person who violates the act is liable to civil penalty if the Secretary of Transportation deems reasonable in the amount of not less than $500 more than $11,000, except with the grossly negligent parent. The repeated violation has created imminent hazard for the death and injury to a person that has caused the death and injury. A penalty not to exceed $202,000 may be assessed. Federal civil penalties implementation adjustment of the Act of 1990's amendment of the Debt Collection Improvement Act of 1996 required the agency to increase the maximum civil monetary penalty with the inflation. The amount of the increase from $10,000 to $11,000, from $20,000 to $22,000, respectively, according to the same line. 2004, but the minimum penalty of $500 was raised to $550 with the maximum penalty of the grossly negligent violation, pattern repeated violation that caused the imminent hazard for the death and injury. Individuals has caused the death and injury was increased from $22,000 to $27,000. $11,000 maximum penalty was not adjusted effective October 9, 2007. Ordinary, the maximum penalty of $11,000 was raised to $16,000 as required under the law effective March 2, 2009. The minimum penalty entered ordinary maximum penalty aggravated. The maximum penalty was raised again. The minimum penalty was increased to $550 to $650. Pursuant to the law's requirement, meaning of the ordinary maximum penalty was increased to $16,000 to $25,000. Aggravated maximum was increased from the $27,000 to $100,000 in accordance with the ultimate authority provided with the Railway Safety Improvement Act 2008. Meanwhile, the ordinary maximum penalty was increased to $16,000, $25,000. Aggravated maximum was increased from $27,000 to $100,000 in accordance with the authority provided under the Railway Safety Improvement Act of 2008, see the Act of 302, Division A, Public Law 110-432, with Statute 122, Statute 488, 48, 78, October 16, 2008, Title 49, U.S. Code 21301 to 21303, with effective June 5th, 2015. The aggravated maximum penalty was raised from $100,000 to $105,000 pursuant to the Federal Civil Penalties Inflation Adjustment Act of 1990, Public Law 10410, with the 104 Statute 890, with the Title 28 U.S. Senate Code 2461, with note of the amendment of the Secretary 310001 S1 Debt Collection Improvement Act of 1996, with the Public Law 104 134 110, with the Statute 11321 to 3073, April 16, 1996. Each employee who is required with a permitted to be on duty for a longer period with the prescribed law who does not receive the required period of the rest represent the separate, the distinctive violations subject of the railroad to separate civil penalty. In this case, the violation, Section 2A of the A4, with each of the day of the facility is not compliant with the Constitution, separate offense for the subject of the railroad to separate civil penalty. And compromising the civil penalty is under the fact the FRA takes into account the nature, circumstances, extent of the gravity of the violation committed within, and the respect of the person found to be have committed such violation, degree, culpability, his prior with the prior proceedings of equal offensive ability, the effect of the inability to continue the submission and such other matters of the subject that may require justice. Justice may require. Statute limitation. No suit may be brought after the expiration of 2 years from the date of the violation unless the administrative notification of the violation has provided with the person in the charge with the 2-year period. The event may suit with the brought after the expiration of the period specified in Title 28 U.S. Standard Code 2461. 2462. Exemptions are railroad which applies more than 15% of the coverage of the hours of service act, including single name with the hostlers, except the law of the requirement of the FRA after hearing the for good cause should shown the exemption must be supported in the finding that it is in public interest and that would not advisably, effectively, safely. Exemption need not to relate to all carriers, employers. If no event was made, any of the employee would accept the railroad be required to permit to work beyond 16 hours continuously and aggregate within any 24-hour period. An exemption is subject to review at least annually. Alright, Appendix B, Schedule of Civil Penalties. Subpart B, the records of reporting 2289, Railroad Records 1,000, 2,000, willful. 228, 11,000, hours of duty 1,000, 2,000, willful. 228, 17, dispatcher 1,000, violation. 2,000, willful violation. 22, 8, 19, monthly reports of excessive services 1,000, $2,000. Appendix C, the part to be reserved. Appendix D, the part to 228, guidance for the fatigue management plans. Railroad subject to subpart F of this part substantive hours of service requirements of the trained employees engaged in the computer and inter-city railway transportation with conserve the adopting of written fatigue management plan that is designed to reduce the fatigue experience with their trained employees subject to this part. Also reduce the likelihood of the accidents, incidents, injuries, fatalities caused by the fatigue of these employees if the railroad is required to have fatigue mitigation plan with under statute 22-8-407 to continue with the fatigue mitigation tool of the railroad determine whether to mitigate with the risk of the public, but the particular work schedule with the level of fatigue without above the fatigue threshold. Then the railroad's fatigue management plan could include the railroad's written fatigue mitigation plan with the designated source for the distinguishing from the department of the plan with the optional could be separate documentation as provided with the statute 228-407 A2 and E. Compliance with the fatigue mitigation plan with itself, the mandatory good fatigue management plan contains the targeted failure fatigue countermeasurement of the particular railroad. In other words, the plan takes into account varying circumstances of operation of the railroad on the different parts of the system that should describe the appropriate fatigue countermeasurement to address the verifying circumstances. Additional plans address each of the following items as applicable. One, employee education training upon the psychological human factors that affect fatigue, as well as the strategies to reduce the mitigate effects of fatigue based on the amount of the most current scientifically analytical research literature, operation of the identification, diagnosis of the treatment of any medical condition, may affect alternativeness of the fatigue, including sleeping disorder. 3, effectively only employ fatigue on the employer short term with a sustained response to emergency situations such as derailment, natural disaster, engagement, other intensive work conditions. 4, scheduling practices with the employees, including the initiative scheduling practice within duty, the call, the practice for the work rest cycle, the records for the consecutive days for the office of the employees, changing the shift of the patterns, appropriate scheduling practice for the verifying types of work, other aspects of employee scheduling that would reduce the employee fatigue with the circumambulative sleep loss. 5, methods of minimizing accidents. Incidents occur with the result of working at the time. Scientific medical research has shown that increased fatigue disrupt employees' circadian and rhythm. Alternatives strategies such as policies and napping attitude address acute drowsiness and fatigue while an employee is on duty. Opportunities to obtain restful sleep at the lodging facilities include employee sleeping quarters provided by the railroad. 8, increase the number of the consecutive hours of off-duty rest during which the employee receives no communication from the employee, railroad, its managers, and supervisors, officers, and agents for the abrupt changes in the rest cycle for the employees. Finally, if the railroad chooses to adopt the fatigue management plan, the FRA suggests for the railroad review the plan, update the periodic as the railroad sees fit as changes are warranted. And that was part 228 hours of service with railroad employees, record keeping and reporting sleeping quarters.